मैं हिंदी सीख रही हूँ, थोड़ा-थोड़ा हिंदी बोलती हूँ. Everything's 5 minutes. Oh, like the plumber says he'll be here in 5 minutes. It's an hour. You can never trust 5 minutes. Whereas in Australia, if someone says 5 minutes, they generally mean 5 minutes. Or one other activity that is really recommended for improving your speaking is called shadowing.
Don't come to Australia without watching this video first. Why I'm saying this? Because our special guest Amanda, who was born and raised in Australia, currently living in India, has shared the cultural differences between Australia and India, which will blow your mind. She has also highlighted how she has struggled to adopt the Indian culture and how you can easily adopt the Australian culture, learn Aussie slangs, and tips to improve English language. I'm sure you won't regret to watch this video completely. So sit back, relax, learn, and enjoy this conversation with Amanda. Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel Smart Migrant Academy. Today we have a special guest Amanda who runs own YouTube channel Amanda Aussie English with Amanda. So let's start with a bit about yourself so that our audience will get an idea like where are you originally from and how did you end up in India?
Okay, so this question is never easy for me to answer, as in where I'm from, because I was born in Sydney. And when I was 8, I moved to my hometown, which is in New South Wales, a small town on the beach called Woolgoolga, or it's next to a city called Coffs Harbour. So I grew up there. I did my higher education there. I went to TAFE there. After that, I moved to Uluru, Ayers Rock Resort in the middle of the country, spent a year there, moved to Darwin for 2 years. And then after Darwin, I moved to Brisbane, and I was in Brisbane for 6 years. So my dad still lives in my hometown. My mum and brother live in Brisbane. So whenever I go back to visit, I usually spend my time between Brisbane and Woolgoolga.
Lovely. So now you are in India, so I believe you must have experienced some cultural shock. So would you
Yes.
mind telling our audience like how did you feel and what's going on in India?
Yeah, definitely. I just realized I didn't answer your question before about why I moved to India. So I'll quickly answer that. Then I can talk about the culture shocks. I actually moved here to get married. My husband is Indian. I think the biggest culture shock to begin with was the language. So when I moved here, all I knew was namaste. And like that was it. That's all I knew. So now I'm learning Hindi. So मैं हिंदी सीख रही हूँ. थोड़ा-थोड़ा हिंदी बोलती हूँ.
Oh, all right. What words did you learn in Hindi?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've been learning Hindi for a couple of years now, so that's definitely eased that side of the culture shocks. But in the beginning, it was really isolating because I couldn't speak the language. My husband's parents don't speak English. So when they would come to visit us, so we live independently from them, I just felt very lonely because I couldn't keep up with conversations. I didn't know what was going on outside. Like I live in Chandigarh, but not in Chandigarh city. I live on the Punjab side. So most people speak either Punjabi or Hindi. Not a lot of people speak English when I went outside. So it was really isolating that side of things. Also, I think for me, food was fine. I have Indian food every day now for lunch. I learned how to cook Punjabi or North Indian food in the pandemic. So food's not too bad.
Lovely.
But I think the biggest thing was definitely the language, the fact that there's no routine here, no structure to people's routines. For me personally, anyway, like my husband has his own business, so he doesn't have a typical office job. He wakes up when he wants, he sleeps whenever he wants. And before I started working, I had that same routine. And coming from Australia where everything's so structured and I had a routine for everything, it was really hard to then be like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing today. Also,
Sometimes it's the best
everything
part,
is
you know?
loud. I know, yeah, true. At the beginning, it was good because it was great to have a break from that kind of routine. But after maybe 2 months, I was like, oh, I'm really craving some consistency in my days. And everything's so loud here. Like there's just loudness everywhere, and it can be quite overwhelming when you're not used to it. And I'm kind of used to it now, but there's some days where it does still get quite overwhelming.
Yes. And how did you end up with driving in India? Did you drive?
Oh yeah, I do. I drive locally. I actually don't drive when I go
Mhm.
back to Australia now because I'm scared I'm going to break too many rules in Australia because it's so flexible here. Like I was so paranoid that when I was like I drove twice in Australia in my hometown because the roads had
Mhm.
not changed. It's a small town. I was very comfortable there. But I was scared I was going to accidentally beep at someone like if I was reversing, if I was overtaking. Um Here I have driven around elephants, dogs, cows, like tractors, everything. So it's not too bad.
No, I can totally understand where you're coming from. So I just want to check with you, like, you'll be the perfect person to answer. Like, would you mind telling the cultural differences and what is the Australian culture and how
Mm,
someone can adapt to the culture? Basically, whosoever like international students or someone who's planning to come to Australia,
mm,
they really wonder like what's Australian culture is.
yeah. It's my understanding that Australian culture is very laid back and relaxed,
Mhm.
but I feel like Indian culture is also very relaxed in some ways. So I think the main difference is that there's a better work life balance in Australia. So here in India, it's not uncommon to
Mhm.
work 6 days a week, 10-hour days, expected to
Yeah.
do overtime unpaid, things like that. Whereas in Australia, it's very rare that you get asked to do overtime. And if you do get asked to do overtime, you have the right to say no. Generally, you'll be paid for it. You never work 6 days a week, unless, for example, you have two jobs and you choose to work that many hours. But a regular
Mhm.
company job working Monday to Friday, it's very, very standard to have like your 8 hours or 7.5 hour days. And managers will actually encourage you to finish on time and leave on time. So
True.
even though it's very relaxed, I feel like there's definitely a difference with the work life balance.
Mhm.
Australian culture is also very direct. And I have noticed that in India, in a lot of communication, Indians tend to be very indirect. So, for example, in Australia, it's very common to be told, no, oh, I don't want to do that today. No, let's not do
Yeah.
that. I don't feel like doing it. Um, Whereas most Asian countries don't like being so direct. So they will
Yeah.
kind of go around trying to say no. Oh, we'll see. Yeah, let's talk about it later. But they
Yeah.
won't directly say
Yeah.
no. So I think
Yeah.
that's something to keep in mind that
That's the indirect way of saying no.
exactly. I know if my husband says to me, we'll see, I know that's a
Yes.
no. And I have to say to him now, is that a no or is that an actual we'll see? This actually caused some
That's
problems for
funny.
us in the beginning because I was very direct. And he used to say to me, why are you so rude? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not rude. I'm just telling you how I feel. I don't want to do this. Um, so, something to keep in mind that if you do speak to an Australian or you're in a
Mhm.
workplace and people are very direct, they're not being rude, it's just different. I know that some people tend to get a little bit maybe offended when people are that direct, but it's
Yes.
not that it's wrong. It's just a different
Mhm.
a different culture and a different way of communicating. Um, Being on
Wow.
time or being punctual is really important in Australia, and that's a huge difference with Indians and
Yeah.
Australians. Is that in Australia they tell
True.
you that if your shift starts at 9 o'clock, you have to be there at 10 minutes before, and you have to be like if it's a desk job, if you're
Yes.
working in a
True.
cafe or restaurant, you have to be at your workstation, behind the counter at your start time, not walking in the door at your start time. So that's
Yes.
a big
True.
cultural difference too. Yeah. So if you're walking in the door at 9 o'clock, you're already late because you're supposed to be on your computer
Yeah.
answering calls, starting your work, serving customers at that start time, not walking through the door. So
Yep. Yep. No,
yes, and you will get in
I
trouble.
totally agree because
Yeah.
yes, yes. Because I remember when I was supposed to start at 9, I was there at 9 or 5, and they were like,
Oh,
you're
yep.
supposed
Too
to
late.
be here at least at 8:55, yeah, so that you'll be
Yep.
ready to work sharp at 9." I was like, okay, because that's totally different in India. Because if you are saying someone that I'll be there at 8:30, it means you'll be there at 9:30.
I know. Yes. And again, all of these cultural differences are actually culture shocks for me. as well. So everything I'm saying about Australian culture and
Yes.
things to be mindful of, they're things that I experience the opposite of here in India. Everything's 5 minutes. Oh, like the plumber says he'll be here in 5 minutes. It's an hour. You can never trust 5 minutes. Whereas in Australia, if someone says 5 minutes, they generally mean 5 minutes, or they're very honest about what's going on. Whereas people here don't like being very direct. Like if there's a problem, they won't say straight out, this is the problem. They'll say, there's, some issue, but don't worry. So, yes, being on
True.
time. But yeah, 9:05, 5 minutes might not seem like much to Indians, but in Australia, you're late. And if you're late too many times in a row,
Yes.
you can get a written warning. Too many written warnings, you can lose your job.
Yes. Yes. True, true. I totally agree with this because, like, I mean, if we are extending for 10 minutes as well, but you still be rewarded for extra 10 minutes that you have worked. So I feel that
Yeah.
even that 5 to 10 minutes does count in workplace. No, I
Mm.
totally agree. So,
Yeah.
I would say, would you mind telling our audience, like, what would be the funny Australian slang, or if someone is here, then they must know about some Australian slang.
Yes. Definitely. Before I do that, sorry, there's just one more thing I want to say about
Mm-hmm.
how to adapt to Australian culture. I think the most
Yeah, sure.
important thing is just to keep an open mind. Know that you are
Mhm,
living in a different country or you're going to a different country. Things will be hard and things will be
mhm,
different. And it does take time to adjust. Like it took me at least 1 year. The first year in India was the hardest. And then it took me about 3 years to
mhm,
really feel settled and comfortable here. So it's not a quick process. It does take time to try and find your balance. But at the same time, while it's expected to adjust to Australian culture, don't forget about where you come from. Um, you know, if you are a religious person, keep going to the temple, keep going to the Gurdwara, whatever it is. Keep doing those things that you did in India or your home country, because that's going to help keep you connected to your own culture. There's nothing wrong with staying connected, but I think it's also
yeah,
important to adapt to the local culture and do what you can to
mhm,
adjust, but don't forget about your
mhm,
culture completely. Um, that's something that I've really made sure I tried to do here, is not forget about my culture. I know that people think
mhm,
Australians don't really have culture, but I've tried to definitely find ways to stay connected to my country
yeah,
and where I come from, things
mhm,
like that. So yeah, don't forget about that, but also just keep an open mind that these things do take time. Um, but yes, in regards
true.
to the slang, there's a few I've
Slangs,
got
yes,
here.
please.
Yes. So I think that's really funny is she'll be right. That just means like everything will be okay. Sab theek ho jayega, basically.
Yeah,
So um it's funny because she doesn't refer to a female. It could be a female, a male, a situation. So um oh, we were supposed to go to the beach today and it looks like it's going to rain. She'll be right. I'm sure it'll be fine. So we're talking about the weather. She'll be right.
true.
So yeah, it doesn't
Straight wrong.
necessarily
No,
mean,
that's
yeah, sorry, yeah.
that's new for me as well.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so that one is
Yes.
I think yeah, pretty common with a lot of people. But yeah, it just
Mhm.
means oh, it'll be fine.
The most common one I've heard is the good day,
Yeah.
mates. Like these are the very common ones.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So g'day mate or just mate in general, very, very common. Another
Yeah.
one that's really common, and I think it's kind of funny, is how you going? So that just means how are you? It doesn't mean where are you going or how are you going somewhere. Like the first time I said this to my husband when we first started talking, it was on the phone. I was like, hey, how you going? And he's like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. I'm at home. So there is that confusion because of they listen to the going at the end rather than the how question. So how you going just means how are you? And you just reply as you would with how are you? Oh yeah, I'm good, I'm fine, not bad. That sort of
Yeah.
thing. And the last one I think is no dramas. So the more common term that a lot of people
Yeah.
use in Australia is no worries. Koi baat nahi. So no dramas is not as common as no worries, but a lot of people get confused because they hear drama and they think that someone's telling them to stop being dramatic. Don't show any drama, stop being dramatic. But it just means don't worry, it's fine. No dramas. So there's a lot of words where people get a little bit confused because they think it has a different meaning to what it actually means.
Right. Okay. I'll use it next time.
Yes.
Perfect. And you are an ESL English teacher. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. Technically ESL teacher.
So would you mind telling our audience what is ESL teacher?
Yes, exactly. So ESL stands for English as a Second Language. So that's why we wouldn't say ESL English teacher because English is already in the acronym. But basically, I'm a teacher of the English language for people who are learning English as a second or foreign language. So English is not their first language. They're learning it as a second, third, whatever it is. So basically, my job is to teach people English, but not the English that I learnt in school growing up because that's my first language, but learning it for the purposes of communicating or learning another language.
So in that case, would you mind giving some tips or to our international students who are planning to come to Australia and who are planning to write an exams for IELTS or PT, like how they can improve English language?
Yeah, definitely. So as for IELTS and PTE, I don't teach exam prep, so I can't give specific examples on how to improve for those, but generally speaking, to learn English, it's doing as much as possible, really. So to improve in any skill, it requires active participation. So doing as much as you can. So in terms of improving listening, listen to a variety of accents. So in Australia, it's not just Australian accents you'll hear. You'll hear Australians, you'll hear Indian English accents, Chinese English, you'll hear, a lot of different European English accents. Listen to a variety of different audios, whether that's TV shows, movies, podcasts, YouTube channels. Don't get comfortable with the one kind of show because you'll start to get used to the accents, or finish a series and start something different. But do more listening. On YouTube, on Netflix, on Spotify, you can change the speed. So if you find that people are talking too fast, go into the settings. There's an option called playback speed. You can change the speed to be a bit slower. So if you find that, people are talking really fast, just change the speed. That's still letting you understand and, listen to that language. Yeah. Also, try multitask. So as I said, I'm learning Hindi. I know what it's like to be a busy, working professional or studying and trying to make time for learning a language. So what I normally recommend for my students is to try and incorporate the language learning into their current routine. So on your way to work or school, if you normally listen to a podcast or music or watch Netflix in your native language, change that to English because you're already doing that activity and it's not going to feel like you're doing anything kind of extra. You're just substituting, for example, if Hindi is your native language, instead of watching Hindi shows on Netflix, switch it to English shows. That's something I do. I go to the gym at night. I spend a bit of time on the treadmill after my workout, and normally I watch English Netflix. I've now switched that for Hindi shows. So it's kind of like using that time to practice the language without putting any extra effort in. Because if you're trying to do that after a busy day at work or a long day of maybe work and study, it's going to be really, really hard to kind of stay engaged. But doing it inside the routine, it's a lot easier.
I'm loving your feedbacks because I really feel that those are very important things. I mean, this is teeny tiny tips, but it's actually very effective.
Yeah, definitely. As for speaking, I think speaking in another language is definitely the hardest skill out of all of them, especially if you're a really shy person and you don't want to maybe you feel a bit nervous to talk to people in English, for example. But there are some things that you can do at home that doesn't involve talking to people straight away. So reading out loud is a really good one. Whether you read kids' books, whether you just read something you find online, whatever it is, speaking the words out loud will help build up your pronunciation, and it will build up your kind of mouth muscles. You're training your mouth to pronounce certain sounds. So reading out loud is a way to improve that. Also, practice timed speaking. Set a timer for like 30 seconds or 1 minute. Record yourself and just talk about anything. But don't focus on being correct. Just focus on talking, because that's kind of training yourself for on-the-spot talking and thinking, or critical thinking. And then you can listen back to your recordings, and then you can start to see, oh, maybe I should have said this here. Maybe I've said the wrong tense. Maybe I've said this wrong. And you can start learning from that. But instead of trying to focus on being correct straight away, just talk. And that's going to get you more confident in speaking on the spot. One other activity that is really recommended for improving your speaking is called shadowing. So that's basically where you copy a native English speaker. There's two ways to do that. You can listen to a dialogue. People can do it with this video. They listen to me speaking, pause it, and then repeat the sentence back and try and focus on my pronunciation. So those are some things people can do at home without actually having to speak to people, but you have to speak to someone eventually. So in that case, normally what I suggest is to start small. When you go to Woolies or Coles, start talking to the cashier. Don't go to self-serve checkout. Go to the cashier, and they're going to ask you, "How you going today?" "I'm good, thanks. How are you?" So those are some things people can do. Ask them back. They're in a customer service role. It's kind of their job to keep the conversation going. If you're just buying two things like bread and milk, it's not going to be a long, awkward conversation. It's going to be a very quick interaction. And this is a really great starting point to start building confidence to talk to people.
Lovely. I mean, I wish I would have known these feedbacks earlier. Before I moved to Australia, this could have helped me much better. But yeah, no worries. Now we all got to know the tips. And if you still have any doubts, then obviously you can follow Aussie English with Amanda on YouTube and Instagram.
Yes.
Then you'll get to know more tips. And I believe we have covered most of the topics that I believe our audience might be interested in. So thank you so much again for your time, Amanda.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. Audience, if you have any questions, then please comment down below, or you can follow and subscribe to Amanda's channel, which is Aussie English with Amanda.
Yeah, I will also mention as well, I do have a second YouTube account. It's actually my first YouTube account called G'day Namaste. It's about my life in India. So if it's just vlogs, I do Hindi vlogs, talk about why I moved to India, about my life. So I'm not as active on it now because I'm focusing on Aussie English with Amanda. But if you are interested about what I get up to here in India, you can also look at G'day Namaste.
Thank you. In that note, I want to end this podcast with Namaste.
Namaste. Bahut bahut dhanyavad.